Hey YouTube, it's Enigma here. So this is our 10th session in Road to Cat RC Explain series. This time we are dealing with the philosophy RC. As usual, I will provide the PDF of the session in the comment section below so you can access through it. And so without wasting any time, let's get started with the RC itself. It is easy to see why philosophers have, on the whole, avoided talking about sleep. So author says that it is very easy to figure out why philosophers have avoided about talking about sleep. Those who see the aim of philosophy as being as to cultivate the most unpeeled mode of wakefulness are likely to treat sleep as an enemy. Not only is sleep a reminder of our ultimate helplessness or even of how circumscribed a place thought sometimes plays in our life, there is also the fear of contagion, as if talking about sleep might induce it. Just as the reference to yawning will get at least 50% of you to yawn in the next 15 minutes. So what the author is saying here that the aim of philosophers, as because the aim of philosophers is to cultivate the most unpeeled mode of wakefulness, which means they wish to figure out they are concerned about the particular aspect of wakefulness as well. That's why they consider or they that's why they consider sleep as an enemy. Because of that, they treat sleep as an enemy, and that's why they have avoided talking about sleep as a whole phenomena itself. And also one of the aspect is that they treat sleep as an enemy because their goal is actually to pursue wakefulness. Second thing is that the fear of contagion as well. Fear of contagion, as if you're talking about sleep, it might induce it. So that's the two reasons that the philosophers have avoided talking about sleep. That's the mention that's been here in the first paragraph itself. Let's go on to the second paragraph. Of course, there is no reason why the mind should not think about its antithesis. Now, author says that there is actually no reason why the mind should not think about its antithesis, that is its opponent, like just the particular opposite of the mind, nor why super mindful philosophers should not take an interest in our regular spells of compulsory mindlessness. Now, this is specifically important. That author says that there is no reason why you can say philosophers should not pay heed to or attention to sleep. They should pay attention to sleep. That's the concern that the author has had. Philosophers, however, have a particular fear of one kind of sleep, the sleep that their own work may introduce. So this is also a particularly important aspect that philosophers fear another, you can say, kind of sleep, and that the sleep that their own work may induce. That is the you can say sleep that the philosophers fear. So this is the third aspect. First, they treat sleep as an enemy because they view, you can say, their goal is to pursue wakefulness. Then the second thing is that they are fearful of contagion itself, and the third thing is that this kind of sleep that their own work may introduce. These are the three parameters due to which philosophers have, on the whole, avoided talking about sleep. That's the thing that we conclude of. Those carefully crafted arguments, the painstakingly revised sentence, expressing insight so they hope into the most fundamental aspect of the world, seem less able than a strip cartoon or a gossip column to hold back the reader from a world dissolving snooze. What this, you can say, sentence means that although they have crafted very, very carefully crafted argument, they have meticulously and painstakingly worked on some sort of argument that they have crafted, but still that argument itself is not able to hold the reader to get, you can say, to go for a snooze, or they fell asleep while reading the argument. But on the other hand, a cartoon or a gossip column is able to hold their reader to go to sleep, which means author is indirectly likely to convey that if a person is reading a cartoon or gossip column, he might not fall asleep, but when he's reading the papers or the theories that the philosopher has crafted, he might get asleep. That's the inference that's been drawn from here. Honest philosophers know that they cannot complain about casting their philosophical poles before drowsy swine, because they too have fallen asleep over the works of philosophers greater than themselves. Then author says that philosophers cannot complain about readers getting sleep onto their own work, because the philosophers themselves have fallen asleep to the greater philosophers' works they have already written. I speak as a minor player who has sometimes dozed off while reading Heidenberg's Being and Time, possibly the greatest philosophical work of the last century, and the subject of a monograph I published a decade ago, and over which others too have dozed off. Then author says that I'm not talking about others as well. I myself has fallen asleep when I was reading Heidelberg's Being and Time, which is possibly the greatest philosophical work of the last century. And the work I published has also made like induced sleep to other people's has also induced sleep to other people as well. On the other occasion, I have woken with a start to discover that Kant's critique of pure reason has fallen off from my slackening head. And other times he find that while he was reading Kant's critique of pure reason, might be a philosophical theory or work, there could be no more profound critique of reason, pure or impure. So he has fallen asleep to you can say Kant's critique of reason as well. That's why there is no profound critique of reason, pure or impure, because the author has himself has fallen asleep while he was reading that book. For Descartes, cessation of thinking meant ceasing to be an I. So thoughtless sleep was vexing indeed, a vegetable organic gap in our spiritual life. Now, this is specifically important because it introduces to Descartes. Now, this paragraph introduces to the view of Descartes. According to Descartes, like the phrase has been used here, that cessation of thinking means ceasing to be an I. That means if you are stopping thinking, if at the exact moment if you're stopping thinking, it means that you are stopping to be an I, which means you're stopping to being yourself. You're not a living person if you're stopping thinking. That's the specific thing that the Descartes mentions here. So thoughtless sleep was vexing indeed. So if you are Descartes viewed that if you stop thinking, that you are ceasing to become an individual. So when you are asleep, you're not thinking. So how is that possible that a person who is living is not thinking anything in the sleep? As James Hill pointed out in the Philosophy of Sleep, Descartes, Locke, and Leibniz, Descartes' view of the mind as a substance did not allow for any pause in the continuity of the thought. So this is specifically important because we are getting the insight of Descartes as well. Descartes' view of the mind, because Descartes view mind as a substance which did not allow any pause in the continuity of thought, which means even if you are asleep, your mind is continuously thinking. That was the view of Descartes himself, isn't it? If the mind were the kind of substance or a thing that could be extinguished by the sound of a lecturer's voice and rekindled by a wet flannel, it would not be worthy of a status of a substance which would be immune from mere accidents. So, accordingly to Descartes as well, mind is not a substance which you can say extinguished by the sound of a lecturer's voice, which means mind is not a something which you can say by external thoughts or anyone who can switch off mind, or you can say switch off mind. That is, the thoughts that being processed in the mind in and itself, willingly or unwillingly. Mind goes on to think even if when you're asleep. That's the view that Descartes has. So that's why he concludes in this, you can say, line itself. If the mind were the kind of thing that could be extinguished by the sound of a lecturer's voice and rekindled by a wet flame, which means mind, if mind is something which you can say turned off at lecturer's voice and turned on by a rekindling of a blood flannel, it would not be worthy of the status of a substance which would be immune from the mere accident, which means mind is not something which can be turned on and off willingly or unwillingly. It's always thinking. That's the conclusion that Descartes arrived. Descartes therefore concluded that we never stop thinking, even in the deepest sleep. However, in our deepest sleep, we do not lay down any memories of our thoughts, ad hoc or what. So, which means here itself that Descartes' conclusion has been pointed out that even if you are sleeping, we actually are thinking. Like even if you are in a deeper sleep, we are thinking. But there is a, you can say, condition here that in our deepest sleep, when we are sleeping deeply, we do not lay down any memories of our thoughts. So whatever thoughts that we have, we don't remember it. So there is no memories of those things. This is the conclusion of Descartes himself. John Locke would have none of it. So there is another philosophers that being, you can say, introduced here, that is John Locke. And John Locke actually disagree with what Descartes has said. Empirical evidence, he says, tell us that we do not think when asleep, and that's the end of the story. So, according to John Locke, when we are sleeping, we are not thinking. That is the conclusion that John Locke arrived at. Every drowsy knot shakes. Doctrine Leibniz, anticipating the confusion of a Professor Freud, argued that Descartes was right. So, this is, you can say, another aspect of Leibniz which is being introduced. He is another philosopher, I believe. And he says that he agrees with what you can say Descartes is thinking, that we are thinking during dreamless sleep, but our thoughts are unconscious, rather like the perceptions we have without noticing them. So he says that he actually agrees with Descartes himself that when we are sleeping, we are actually thinking, but you can say the thoughts that we have are unconscious. So that's the conclusion that Leibniz arrived at. Rather, like the perceptions we have without noticing them. So we have perceptions, but we don't notice them. Exactly the way that even if we are sleeping, we actually think about some things, but we are not, you can say, conscious about those thoughts. That is specifically mentioned by Leibniz himself. I leave the reader to referee the decision. So author is saying I leave the reader to think or to choose whatever suitable it is for him. But its unsatisfactory nature offers another reason why the most philosophers have shied away from sleep. So author says that the unsatisfactory nature that you feel is the reason that why most philosophers have shied away from sleep. So as you can see, the passage is specifically pretty linear if you are able to gauge the main idea itself. We start with the concern the philosopher have, that author says that the philosophers, it's pretty easy why philosophers avoided talking about sleep. Then it explores two dimension. They treat sleep as an enemy because their goal is to pursue wakefulness. So because sleep in you can say is an opposite end from wakefulness, that's why they treat sleep as an enemy. Second thing is that they are fearful of the contagion nature of the sleep itself, because when you are talking about sleep, there is a fear that it might induce it. So that's the specific two aspects that you can say explored in the first paragraph itself. The only important thing in second paragraph itself is the fear philosophers are actually fearful of another kind of sleep, the kind of sleep that their own work may produce it, and the example has been given here to illustrate that point itself. Then we are introduced with the you can say the views of author Descartes himself. And Descartes says that even when we are sleeping, we are thinking, but when we are sleeping deeply, specifically where we are deepest sleep, we do not have any memories of the thoughts that we have. You can say when we were sleeping, when we were in a deeper sleep specifically, we do not lay any memories of our thought. That was the view of Descartes himself. Then we are introduced with the John Locke and Leibniz view. John Locke says that he disagrees with Descartes himself, and he says that when we are sleeping, there are actually no thoughts itself. When we sleep, we just sleep. And Leibniz says that no, it's not right. You can say he agrees with Descartes himself that when we are sleeping, the thoughts are actually there, but they are not conscious. And then authors conclude with the argument that it's up to the, you can say, audience itself or the readers itself to judge whatever is right or not. So that was the general conclusion, that how the paragraph went on. So let's start with the question itself. Which of the following, as per the passage, is not a reason for philosophers not taking sleep as subject? So what are the reason that the author gave, that why philosophers are not taking sleep up as a subject? Philosophers are likely to fear the contagion nature of any mention of sleep. That is exactly given here. So this is not an option. This is given in the passage itself. Philosophy's main purpose is believed to be accentuating the wakefulness. This is also given here. If you look back at just a minute, let me just erase it. This line. The aim of philosophy as being to cultivate the most unpaid mode of wakefulness are likely to treat sleep as an enemy. So philosophers' goal is to, you can say, emphasize on wakefulness itself, as you can see. So this is also given here. So this is not the answer. Philosophers are aware that at times their own work might induce sleep. This is also given, if you remember it clearly. In the second paragraph itself was all about this. I have a particular fear of one kind of sleep, the sleep that own work may introduce, and the various examples are also given to illustrate this passage, this point itself. So this is not the answer. So clearly by elimination itself, 4 is the answer. Let's look at the option itself and check. Philosophers basically do not find the idea of sleep appealing and beneficial. It's been said in the passage that philosophers have not, you can say, have avoided talking about sleep, but it is certainly not mentioned here. You can't infer that because philosophers have avoided talking about sleep, they do not find the idea of sleeping appealing and beneficial. It's been, you can say, out of scope. This is not something that we can infer from this. So this is specifically the example of the answer of the first question itself. Question number second: which of the following is Descartes least likely to agree? So least likely to agree, such questions you have to remember that there is actually a scale. There is agreeability and there is disagreeability. So there might be options, multiple options, which fall on to, you can say, this criteria, which means disagreeability. But we have to check for that option which is most disagreeable, because we have been asked in the question which of the following is Descartes least likely to agree, which means most to disagree. So choose the option which Descartes which most likely to disagree. The state of functioning mind is apparently tied to the existence of an individual. Now, specifically, you have to think that when was Descartes mentioned here? Descartes was actually mentioned in the third paragraph itself, isn't it? And he said in the first one itself, cessation of thinking means ceasing to be an I, which means if you stop thinking, then you are ceasing to be an individual itself. And if you look at the option that's been specifically mentioned here, the state of functioning mind is apparently tied to the existence of an individual, which means if you if you have a functioning mind or a state of a functioning mind, how a mind is functioning is apparently tied to the existence of an individual, whether the individual is existence or not. So what they've cleverly done is just use this line and paraphrase that into a phrase and just, you can say, reviewed, and they have just put it that option in the first point itself. So this is actually mentioned here. So this would be agreeing with, you can say, Descartes itself. So this is not the option. A substance or an entity can be demolished or restructured by an external agent. Now, this is something that Descartes would most likely disagree with, because the Descartes' view on substance as mind as a substance was given here. Descartes' view of the mind as a substance did not allow any pause in the continuity of thought. If the mind were the kind of thing that could be extinguished by the sound of a lecturer's voice and rekindled by a wet flannel, it would not be worthy of the status of a substance which should be immune from mere accident, which simply means that mind is not a substance which can be turned on and off at any instance. It's not that because of an external stimulus that mind can be turned off, and because of some inner stimulus the mind can be turned on. It's not something like that. And this goes against that. It says a substance or an entity can be demolished or restructured by an external agent, which means it can be rekindled by inside, and it can be, you can say, stopped by outside. So this is extremely negative itself. So this might be our answer. Let's check further if we find a solution or if we find an option which is much more negative than that. The human mind doesn't cease to process the impulse passing through its nerve. This is exactly correct. The human mind does not stop to process the passing through its does not stop to process the impulse passing through its nerve. It is constantly working. So this is actually with in sync with what Descartes had said. So this is also not the answer that we're looking for. There exists no link between the real world and those of the unconscious state of sleep. Now remember it further. What the Descartes' view was at the end. Descartes therefore concluded that that we never stop thinking, even in the deepest sleep. However, in our deepest sleep, we do not lay down any memories of our thoughts. So even if we are sleeping, sometimes even if we are sleeping, we do not lay down any memories of our thoughts. So there is an individual there. Let's assume this is an individual and he is sleeping. So although he is dreaming about something, but there are no, you can say, conscious thought. And when in reality, when that portion is you can say, when in reality, when this is the reality and this is the dream. So when he's thinking, or when he's sleeping, so even if he's thinking about something, he's not able to remember those because we don't lay down any memories of our thoughts. And in reality, when he's thinking, he is able to lay down memories of our thoughts. So if you think it like this, there is no actually no link between real world and those of the unconscious state of sleep. So this is actually true, but even if, let's say, if this was in a true sense, but it does not goes against Rene Descartes, isn't it? This is somewhere lying between here. This is a gray area. We are not so sure whether it is likely to agree or disagree. We have to choose the option which is most likely, Descartes will disagree with, and Descartes will most likely disagree with second option itself. So this is a sometimes cat plays you with something, these two options. Both of these options can be put onto a disagree scale. Like if you remember, both of these options, the option second and fourth, can be put onto the disagree scale. If this is agreement and this is disagreement, then between this is the midpoint. We don't know. Option 4 might be somewhere along this area, but option 2 is here. Option 4 is, you can say, here, and option 2 is here. And that's why we are picking the two options, because comparative to both these options, the best option is option second. So that's why option second is the answer to this question. Which of the following correctly describes the primary purpose of the passage? So what is the primary purpose of the passage? If you think about primary purpose of the passage, primary purpose of the passage involved why philosophers have not avoided talking about sleep as a phenomenon. Then after, we goes on to describe the reasons behind why philosophers, you can say, why philosophers had not explored sleep as a phenomena, or why they have avoided talking about sleep. Then we go on to view the view of Rene Descartes and some other philosophers such as John Locke, Leibniz. And authors then finally concludes that it's up to the reader to choose what they think is right. That's the specifically flow of the passage itself. So we will look at an option which covers most of what has been said in the, you can say, passage itself. So let's look at the options. Discuss the reason behind philosophers' indifference towards the act of sleeping. Now, many of you might have marked this option, but this option is not correct because of this word, the use of these words, act of sleeping. Like, take a second and think about what has been said here. Are philosophers have, does philosophers have indifference towards sleeping as a phenomena, or they have indifference towards act of sleeping? That you are sleeping, I have a problem that why are you sleeping? Why are you sleeping? I have a really big problem of why are you sleeping? Or they are concerned towards the sleeping as a phenomena itself, that they avoid talking about sleep because of these reasons itself. So it's not that they are showing indifference towards sleeping itself, that why are you sleeping. If a person is trying to sleep, then they are showing indifference, that why are you sleeping. I'm like very, very, you can say, sad that why are you sleeping. This is not specifically like that. They are indifferent of sleeping as a phenomena, not, you can say, act of sleeping itself, that how you are sleeping, what like what are the processes that you are doing while sleeping. So this is not the specific answer that we're looking for. So this is not the answer. This was a very clever trap, that cat contains some kind of sentences which are because of a single word, that act of sleeping. If you are reading in a hurry manner, then you might just take this and you might lose 4.4 marks itself. So that's like a very hefty penalty, isn't it? Refute the claims of Rene Descartes regarding what goes in the brain in the state of sleep. Author is not trying to, the whole passage is not about Rene Descartes, isn't it? Author is not trying to refute what Descartes said. Author himself said in the last line itself that it's up to the reader what they think that it's best for that. So because of that reason itself, 2 is not the answer. Argue a consensus between varying claims on the function of brain in the state of sleep. Is the passage about the varying claims on the function of brain, that what is the function of brain in the state of sleep? We are just completely leaving philosophers as a whole in the, you can say, in this discussion. And sometimes you might think, okay, this might be the answer. Just take a brief pause and read the whole sentence itself before going on to the paragraph. And after reading that sentence itself, do you think that after reading this I might get a picture or image of the passage that I've just read? No. If I have read, if I think what it is, this is the primary purpose of the passage, that argue consider between varying claims on the function of brain in the state of sleep, then the main focus in the function of brain, isn't it? That what is the function of brain in the state of sleep? And there might be no reason to discuss philosophers here as well. So that's why this is not the answer. Present and contrast the different positions of philosophers on the sleep and its feature. This is exactly what the primary purpose of the passage is. We are presenting and contrasting the different positions of philosophers on the sleeps and its feature. And although it doesn't cover that the reasons why philosophers have avoided the talking about sleep, but this is possibly the best answer between these two. If act of sleeping was not present here and some other word was present here, maybe in that case one might be a better option than fourth itself. But since we have provided act of sleeping, which makes it blatant wrong, so that's why fourth is correct answer towards the third question. So let's look at the last question itself. Which of the following, if true, will support the views of John Locke about sleep the most? So, if true, which of the following, if true, will support positive John Locke about sleep the most? Positive. So, we are looking for an option which is positive, which means which supports the view of John Locke itself. And we, so the let's look at the John Locke's view. What was John Locke's view itself, isn't it? So, let's erase it. John Locke would have none of it. Imperial evidence, he says, tells us that we do not think when sleep, and that's the end of the story. So John Locke's view was when we are sleeping, we are not thinking. So we have to choose an option which accurately pinpoints that option. That when we are sleeping, we are not thinking. There is substantial research that shows that all sleep is the same and that both the body and mind are dormant when we fall asleep. This is exceptionally positive with what John Locke has said, isn't it? This option says that has been research that has been discovered that when we are sleeping, the body and the mind are dormant, which means they are not working, they are inactive. So this is specifically the option which might be the answer, because this is in, you can say, in sync with what John Locke said. This supports the argument of John Locke itself. So this might be answer. Let's check 2, 3, and 4. Scientists have shown the processing of thoughts and informations take place not only during the day but also during the night, so also during sleep. So this is actually wrong itself, because this actually goes against what John Locke has said. John Locke says that when you are sleeping you are not thinking, and this goes against that. So 2 is not the answer. In the absence of tools capable of translating brain activity, the content of our sleeping thoughts, though existent, remain inaccessible. Now look at the way that the option has been framed. In the absence of tools capable of translating brain activity. So when we don't have any tools which are able to translate brain activity, the content of our sleeping thoughts, though existent. Now this line itself, that the content of our sleeping thought, though existent, which means when we are sleeping, there are some thoughts. It says that it agrees onto it, that when we are sleeping, the content of our sleeping thought, though existent, which means when we are sleeping, are there are some thoughts which exist when we are sleeping. So this itself makes this option wrong. Like, and if you read the whole sentence itself, the meaning is, if we don't have any tool of translating brain activity, then content of our sleeping thoughts, when we are sleeping, there are some thoughts we are not able to access them. So this in itself is, you can say, extremely erroneous, you can say here, uh, sentence itself. So it's not an option. This goes against what John Locke has said. The discussion of the moral and criminal responsibility of dreaming has been centered on sleepwalking, where sleepwalkers have harmed others. This is completely irrelevant. Like, it, we are not even sure whether this supports or this goes against of John Locke itself. This is completely irrelevant, because there is no discussion of moral and criminal responsibility in the argument of John Locke itself, isn't it? So this is even not the answer. So the answer to this question number 4 is option number 1. So as you can see, this was not a very typical passage. There might be some traps which you might have came across. Specifically, I would say to the discussion of René Descartes itself. If you're not even able to understood the main argument of Descartes himself, you might, you can say, tick the option wrong when it comes to the question of which was considered about René Descartes itself. So sometimes, like, you can, I will first encourage you, whenever you are coming across these kind of phrases or clauses, that cessation of thinking means ceasing to be an I. Sometimes you have to provide some ample amount of time in order to understand it, and if you're not able to understand it, just leave it. And if there is question surrounding with, you can say, which contains the use of a phrase, because cat has specifically been grown very fond of using a phrase and then providing the contextual meaning or framing questions around that phrase itself. If you're able to understand that, it's pretty okay. It doesn't just go on, because the chances of error, if you have not if you don't fully grasp the meaning of that phrase in the context itself, chances are that you will make the wrong choice and you will tick. There's only 25% chance that you will get the question right. So it's better to just leave that question all along. So this is it. And in the next session itself, we'll be discussing another passage which is specifically related to anthropology or biology itself. We will check it further when in the future.